sometimes when we use a word like romance or being romantic, or we don't always really understand and appreciate the use of the word. And very often, even like the name of a plant, I'll go and look up its origin and find out what it means. It helps me to understand it better. So I went and looked up the word romance, or the idea of being romantic. And it says, in terms of a person, a romantic person indulges his imagination in the creation and contemplation of scenes of an ideal life very different from the actual. And the idea of a cottage garden is simply the fact that it is totally your garden. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It's what you think. You're not subject to what's in or out or what's fashionable. It creates the immediate idea or the image that somebody that lives here is a romantic person. It does nothing but say, I love flowers, I love vines, I love window boxes, I love all these things growing, filling, spilling together. By blending all these ideas together, you simply say, this is what I am. My garden has evolved as a series of rooms, very much like the rooms inside of a house. Each one of these rooms expresses a different feeling. Some are restful places, some are busy, some are quiet places to sit, and some reflect a great deal of work and a lot of activity. Each garden room is a scene of an ideal life, very different from the actual, as I chose to create it. They come together to express different aspects of myself, to say this is what I am, creating a total garden picture in which the garden and the gardener are one. A number of years ago, I was riding down a highway, and we live in an area where there are lots of nice hills, and I looked off in the distance and I saw all these layers of deciduous hardwoods breaking forth into spring, all their new growth, and then shortly after their tassels. And I realized, what could be more beautiful than this combinations of gray greens and ambers and golds and salvia greens and bright greens and chartreuses? No wonder it's so pleasant to look at, because it's what we've lived with all our lives, and now I'm just now seeing it. And then I realized, here I'm up here. If I got up a little further and looked down, say if I took out a hot air balloon ride, I'm really looking at the ground cover of the earth. You know, we say shade gardens and we want ground covers for the shade, so we think of hostas. Well, you know, a hosta is really way down here by comparison. But it is that overstory and that sense of color that if we make our color schemes relevant to what is around us, what's native, and if we do introduce garden plants from other places, that they be compatible in all aspects, and in particular, you know, in their color, but keeping in mind that it's color of foliage, color of stems in the wintertime, color of berries, growth habit, simply making something visually compatible. The garden goes around in a small circle of grass and is quite visible from the street. It's, you know, sidewalks can be busy, cars go by, people do come by. Sometimes there are people who've visited before, sometimes it's new people. But there from the street is this inviting view. Look in, look at me, see me. Walk in the garden to the arbors, passing out of what might be that life outside, and come down the dirt driveway and up the steps through the arbor. Take your time, look around, go sit down in one of the rustic settees and enjoy that moment. So this great oak that really inspired me and taught me to see also creates a great quality in my first garden, which is one of tranquility. It's tranquil because this great oak has provided shade, which is also, this tree takes away maybe unpleasant sounds. The trees absorb sound, so it makes it a quiet place. And under this great tree, this Quercus alba, this white oak, I put together a combination of plant materials that interplay, interrelate from that ground cover right down to the ground cover that covers the ground as we know it. And there's some rather nice things that are under the ground that come up, so everything comes together. And as we have seen, in the garden setting underneath this oak with the great deciduous magnolia, Magnolia macrophylla, just to stand there and look through. Be there in the moment when the light comes, this morning sun, or when a breeze comes. The birds love it. They seem to gather there in the morning. It's sort of like, let's come here and sing first. Then there's the buckeye, that's a wonderful plant in bloom right now. Superb textures, it grows up. Then there's Rhodotypus scandens, a monotype that grows down. Then there's the hosta. And then real treasured moment, I think, in one's life is when you planted forget-me-nots or something and they seem to grow up in between the leaves. Then we have delightful plants like the Aurelia elata, Alba marginata, and right next to it, Cercis canadensis forest pansy. This variegation and yet this rich plum, rosy colored foliage overlapping each other. Everything going up, everything coming down, everything coming together to make a successful garden setting. Also, in and of its own nature, by the ambiance creating by the tree itself and what grows with it, successfully creating a romantic quality. What I think has happened to me is that I've learned to recognize and experience and realize the beauty of nature itself. I remember so many magazines and books I've read. I've gone places. I've collected plants now for 9 years, and some of them have come out of ditch banks and some out of old garden yards, and I've swapped plants around with friends. I've done mail orders. I've struggled to find a place for all of them, and now I finally have come to realize that our greatest teacher is nature itself. And it's taking the time, I think, to look and to see exactly what's in front of you. I mean, when you make a garden, you really are making or taking or creating a painting or a photograph or a tableau vivant. And when you look at an experience that inspires you, say you are in England or in Italy, or if you're in South America, or maybe you're in some small courtyard garden in Charleston, you need to start opening up and connecting what is your mind's eye, starting really to see, so that when you try to recreate a certain feeling, even if you wanted to recreate the idea of this garden, a sense of quiet or tranquility, look at all these things around you and realize that what it takes is looking. I mean, I sometimes now go back to some of the books I have had for years and realize how little I saw because I simply wasn't looking. Now I go back and I look at them and I sometimes say to myself, well, why didn't you look in the beginning? You would have saved yourself so much work. But now I can have the pleasure of looking and realizing, well, I have learned something. When you finished spending some quiet moments in the shade garden that's been created in the visitor's garden, if you'd like to continue to visit in the garden, discover some more of its qualities, its garden architecture, its plantings, its touches of whimsy, can leave through another archway with a nice little slatted roof made of sticks. Creates a really rustic kind of effect in a garden, but you know, rustic qualities are sort of making do or making with what you have at hand is a quality that cottage gardens often embrace. Cottage garden being a garden that not only being self-expressive, but also is usually evokes a certain sense of nostalgia because we think of country, small houses, picket fences, and lots and lots and lots of flowers. When you walk through this particular arbor, it's covered with Eleagnus, which is a wonderful evergreen, very loose, tall-growing vine. It's a rambunctious thing and often misused and often clipped back. But if you use the plant to its advantage and take advantage of what it can do for you, growing it over this arbor, it's a way to have a plant work for you rather than you always out there having to clip it. So the idea is also to learn to use your plants for all they give you. And when you pass through and look up, you can see the wonderful silver back of the leaves. And when you come around, it's a really nice, quiet place to sit underneath this oak tree. And if you stop and sit for a moment, you're going to be able to enjoy a really wonderful garden effect, which is created by a series of peaks, again, made of eastern red cedar, all on a subtle forced perspective from going, say, a certain height of 9 foot down to 7. So as you sit, you can see all the peaks simultaneously. It also forces you onto a wonderful object at the end. It's a wonderful old garden ornament that was sitting in the other part of the garden. So you can sit and see all these arches simultaneously and also focus in on the very end. So you get a lot of garden experience all at one time. In the beginning, I wanted every color, a riot of color. It didn't really matter to me what color it was, and I wanted all flowers. And I've grown a bit, and I've really, again, by learning to see, appreciate, not very rigid, totally carried out to the nth degree color schemes, but I've learned to appreciate putting colors together, not only from seeing my own, but listening to other people and what they see and realizing the possibilities of it. Again, becoming more self-expressive and also more refined in how you build your garden settings. What a wonderful scent. Sweet booby bush, the old gardeners call it. It's actually Calacanthus Florida. It's also a very romantic idea to plant a plant like this that's full of fragrance right on the garden path. It fills you up with that romantic idea of fragrance in the garden. This is a stacked stone or dry wall garden filled with a combination of herbaceous plants and woody shrubs and annuals. As you can see, it's composed of stacked stones, which we carefully chose because they looked quite old. Actually, they give you the idea of having been here as long as the house, which is about 100 years, but it's really only been in for 5 years. It also houses some of my favorite plants, one of which is Macleia, now called Bouquet or plume poppy. You can even see right now with the light on it, how it catches the light when the wind blows. The silver backs, even on the stems, catches the wind, and you can say that you really have seen the wind when you see it moving. Wonderful plant like Loropetalum chinense. It blooms quite early in the spring with pale green flowers. Wonderful growth habit of arching, a plant that's good for a wall because it tends to spill and soften the effect of a wall. Hiding underneath its embraces is a wonderful variegated form of Igea. It sort of brings light to what might be a dark spot. I think they blend wonderfully together. A lot of people don't really understand variegated and golden plants, but I think when you see how they can be used to make a better garden setting, you'll start to appreciate them. We'll have Hesperus, a sweet rocket, sort of dispersed and interspersed throughout the garden setting. I like it because it's so light and delicate and airy. The other advantage to it is that it really emits a great fragrance for the early part of the evening. And again, a wonderful growth habit of old China rose, Rosa chinensis oaklandii, so called because it was found in Old Cemetery here in Atlanta. But again, simple flowers. You can enjoy the beauty of what really a rose is made of. Learning to appreciate that a flower doesn't have to be big or bright, but sometimes just the pure simplicity. And you know, what better reason to have a rose than the idea of petals falling down on the grass. It certainly evokes a great sense of romance within me. Then you have something like a red rose. I don't really know where it came from. I probably wouldn't plant one here myself, but it's here, and after a while you stand back and you look at it and you realize it's not so bad. In fact, we need to look back at the whole setting and realize that what we're really doing is creating a wonderful painting that's framed in by this clipped hedge and this dry wall. Sweet Williams, another good old-fashioned garden flower. Come in a great mixture of colors like we have on the street, but I like the pure white ones especially here because we do a lot of white and pale yellow. It's a wonderful little pearly little yellow button ranunculus that blooms and runs in between the Sweet Williams and the feverfew yet to come. You can see how it's just woven itself in among these foxgloves. I think that's when you start to get garden magic. You're also really blending your plants. You're, as my friend Rosemary Veary would say, are creating a situation for good bedfellows. Learning to appreciate the simple plants and simple flowers. They're hybrids of so many plants these days, and it seems that people think that bigger and brighter is better. Well, you know, what could be prettier than the simple, small, delicate flowers of a species foxglove? And then, of course, you have one that I really love, which is the pale yellow, creamy, white Digitalis purpurea alba. Works wonderfully, again, with a variegated shrub, a variegated form of carrier. And there's a certain amount of calming green all through the space. It's because I've integrated a wonderful hydrangea arborescens called Annabelle, which is a native plant that blooms white for us in the late part of June. So in this garden setting, the season continually evolves from early spring even until the fall. And then just this morning I discovered a plant I'd forgotten I'd even planted, Sisyrichium, or blue-eyed grass. Then you, I think at that point, find a garden treasure like that, and you really know that you're doing a good job at gardening because you discover something you didn't know you had, and it becomes a hidden pleasure. And this one little note, this one little plant, so seemingly insignificant, is as important to the whole setting as every single plant. The things that rise up, the things that tumble, the things that smell, the things that are just coming in form, things that are going out, the thoughts of things to come. You can see also that it's held very carefully in place with a restraining clipped hedge, a meandering rock wall, which actually created the path on which I just walked. Reminds me of a very good garden philosophy that was instilled in me by my college professor, and the idea that is when you walk in a garden, the garden should walk with you. And I don't mean that you have to go around telling everybody, well, this is what I think about gardens. But if somebody did ask you, well, what does your garden do for you? When you tell them, what you're doing is expressing what it is about you that makes you feel good about yourself, because that's what your garden is. It's a self-expression. Topiary is another way to really have fun in your garden. Whether you clip hedges or evergreen forms into certain styles, clipping box into patterns and balls and cones. You can also have a great deal of fun by creating topiary in containers. There can be whimsical animal forms, again circles, balls, patterns in pots, which we call parterres in a pot, which we have some in the garden. This is a lollipop, or what the French call a tige, which is a standard, so a ball on the stick. And everybody has their own way of creating topiaries and how they want to clip certain shapes. But we developed our own special technique, because obviously with a standard like this you have an iron rod, which is not real attractive. And so we learned to buy very long-runted ivies, pots that are overgrown, and we braid our stems. And you can see we've already started some braiding, and we just take a long runner and continually follow the same spiral all the way up. And when you get toward the top, of course, what's left of the spiral will become a part of the ivy that eventually becomes the infill for the top or the ball. You also could fill this with sphagnum moss and pin your runners down onto the form or into the moss and get a cover a lot quicker. And then of course you come back and very carefully pinch off all the little lateral buds off the ivy to get it all cleaned up, and you just continually wrap your runners until you're finished. You could also, at that point, we pretty much remove all our excessive runners. Occasionally we may leave a few and actually make a swag or garland around the base of the pot. It takes a little longer to create this particular effect, as opposed to the way many people simply run runners up like this, which is, simply not as attractive. But it's worth it, because when these stems fuse together about a year of growth, your topiary ends up looking more like a true plant from the garden, and you don't have to deal with this unattractive mechanical device. I'd like to show you another form of topiary that we've created. I suppose you could call it a wreath. It'd be wonderful if you set it in a basket. It would even look like it was the handle of a basket. It's a wonderful form because you can sit it in the middle of the table, you can see through it. At Christmas, it's really great fun to wrap ribbons and bells and Christmas ornaments in it so you can use it at different times. I have a wonderful old flower vase from Victorian times. I collect a lot of things because I enjoy bringing the flowers from the garden into the house. And this was used by the Victorians to put flowers in their pots of ferns, and do the same thing here. And you can see that the combination of it is just a wonderful, simple effect and a way to integrate topiary, whether it stays in the garden, is brought into the house, and flowers from the garden at the same time. You do it because it's gratifying and it's quiet, it's peaceful, it still may be a lot of hard work. You also reach a point that you start to do it because people will come to visit you, for instance, and you start to share that. So you know if somebody's coming, you get everything tidied up, neatened up, put flowers in a vase. But you've created this wonderful tableau vivant, this little still life, this little space that you have started to imbibe these romantic qualities in, so somebody else can enjoy it. It's part of the reason why you grow flowers. What's more romantic than going to visit somebody and being able to walk in the garden and pick a small bouquet of flowers? I mean, anybody would be touched by the idea. What's absolutely so special about it, I think, is that it's something you have done for yourself, that it, first of all, has given you pleasure, and you're able to take that gift of well-being and feeling good and take it to somebody else as a gift. That's a lot of great, wonderful ideas and emotions all coming together as one. It's a romantic gesture. When I walk in the garden and am picking flowers, it gives me a great opportunity to spend some time alone just with the flowers and think about colors. And I always discover some incredible combinations because this happens to be in bloom here in one part of the garden, and I find something else because I carry them around in my hand when I pick, and I discover how wonderful it looks with this. It's like this Felix Craft's peony and this Rosa mutabilis. Look at those color combinations. And then I walked further and picked up, some Spirea Beaumaldii, gold flame, some golden barberry. It's pretty shocking yellow, but look at that. And then close by, in another portion of the garden, purple cotinus, or smoke tree. Look at those color combinations. That's how we learn the beauty of nature, I think, and take advantage of what nature offers us. I've talked about plants in the garden just for foliage because so many things are there just for flowers. It's very important to plant things for foliage because after some of the flowers are gone, you still have the beauty of working with something like this purple smoke tree all the seasons. Even in the fall, after its foliage is dropped, its flower heads stay in place and can be used in dried arrangements. Putting together a flower arrangement for me is pretty easy because like everything else in my life, I use it as a sense of style or the way I feel about my garden. And since it sort of has that quality of being a romantic cottage garden, my arrangements usually reflect that. I think it's something we all can learn to do more of. When you put this kind of thing together, this arrangement that's going to reflect the garden and what's in bloom, you should also be thinking at the same time that, well, you know, for us, you know, it's, look at this, how it's starting to come together already. That this is the month of May in the garden. And when you get through, what you're going to have is a living image or living picture of what is in bloom all throughout the garden for this particular month, which of course is going to be really wonderful when it's finished in terms of a flower arrangement. But you also should be thinking about the idea of making flower arrangements all year round, so that you make sure that you always are adding more plants to your garden, things that make berries, things that are evergreen, things that have beautiful fall color, plants that bloom in the wintertime. This is a superb select form of Iris pseudacris that we found in a garden that had been deserted. Other things that you discover sometimes when a flower is in bloom and you pick it, take the time to take a whiff and discover that this flower smells exactly like fresh grapefruit. Old fleabane that grows on the side of the road often escapes and gets into our garden settings. I pull most of it out because it can be invasive, but I always leave some because I think its little daisy flowers are real charming. Iris ibéricas are one of my favorite. We talked about the real pretty blue Bob Hill. These are two that were from seedlings, and they were supposed to be pink. Well, neither one of them are very pink to me, because I was so excited that I would have pink Iris ibérica. And they got planted near the peony Felix Krauss. And when they did come into bloom, I realized what a wonderful mistake had happened, because these colors, look at this with that Felix Krauss. And so sometimes when we expect one thing from our garden and we get another, it's not always necessarily going to be a disappointment. And if you do something in the garden with best intentions, having chosen your plants properly, and it doesn't work out, then maybe rather than taking it out or being disappointed, maybe there's a lesson there in looking around and finding a better place for it. Maybe sometimes we think too fast about what we're doing, and we see an idea somewhere. It doesn't always work for us to exactly copy that idea. I think it's better to be inspired by what you see and take it home and find out if it works for you or not. Maybe it won't work for you in the same way, but it'll work in a different way. These are little flower heads of our native Heuchera americana. They're sort of a see-through kind of thing, which is a special effect that certain plants give us. Veronica Virginiana alba gives us the same effect. I talked about berries, and most of us think about berries in the wintertime like holly and nandina, both of which are quite wonderful, especially Native American holly. But these are the berries of Mahonia belii. It's a winter flowering evergreen plant. I think it's wonderful to have berries like this. They look like grapes. You can see why they would be called Oregon grape holly. But putting that kind of effect in this little arrangement, I think makes it real special. The Flemish made such wonderful paintings of living still lifes. It's in the same way that they would take one painting and spend years on it and putting things very carefully together in a composition, and they would mix all their seasons, and we can look into that the same way as we can look into this and learn what things bloom when, how things are well put together, realizing that every single one of these flowers, every aspect of it, the foliage, the leaves, the forms, the colors of yellow that are in this that make it the yellow that it is, the blues and the purples, all working together, all the qualities of a garden coming together in one really wonderful arrangement that reflects the fact that I have made a cottage garden. borders are composed of 4 quadrants, which is an ancient gardening style that represents the wonderfully romantic idea that the heart is composed of 4 chambers, the center of which represents the center of one's own being. It is at this point that one becomes truly self-expressive. The borders are a very complex garden situation. We talked when we were in the visitor's garden about learning to see and looking. You're looking at a lot of hard work. You're looking at 5 years of time. What I would like for you to do with all that is re-embrace this idea of looking. Look into each quadrant, look at the combinations of plants, look at all the work, but look at the ideas, look at things that are in season now, combined with plants that are going to be blooming in June, with plants that were blooming in October, plants that are combined with clipped and evergreen forms. Look at the way certain things grow up like the grasses do and spew and create a special effect in the garden. Look at how in some of the garden spots things spill over the edge. Certain plants have seeded in among other plants and created a interesting plant combination. Because sometimes we learn things from what plants do on their own. They have fun too. So, look for some of the garden magic too, because it can teach you some few things on its own. And when we walk through the garden together, you look at it, you enjoy it, you take something from it that you can use in creating your own garden, the one that expresses yourself. The garden path that you walk on as you pass through these 4 quadrants has a pattern of its own and a sense of movement in taking you into the space. These old cast stone elements were here. It's always been difficult for me to throw away anything that was actually a viable part of this garden when I first came. So I used them to lay out this pattern that works from end to end and to the center. Then, as you can see, it starts to radiate one more time. It's almost like the sun rays in the center going out and out, bringing you in each point back to 4 smaller quadrants filled with clipped hedges, patterns, topiary, herbaceous plants blending with flowering shrubs, roses rambling, annuals that have sown themselves into the crevices and cracks. I can come out here any time of the year and be just consumed with the pleasure of having made a garden for all seasons. The borders are a very complex garden setting, and as I wouldn't expect you to go out and create this kind of garden for yourself, I'd like to talk with you about some of the plants that I've put together and some of the settings I've created. This is a wonderful form of miscanthus, one of the ornamental grasses that people are now quite feverish about. I really look at them as being rather exotic plants in a garden setting. They're magical for catching light and wind. Even this morning, this one is covered with little tiny drops of dew, which of course catch the light. Back behind it, sort of just beginning to peep through, is a Lespedeza Thunbergii alba. It's sort of a new plant for most of our gardens, even though it's been around for a long time. In August, this plant will be about 5 foot tall and comes weeping through the grass with drooping little pea-like blossoms all over it. And it's a wonderful combination when the two weave together. Behind the grass is a form of Philadelphus. It's one of the more select forms of a hybrid called Natchez. The blossoms are really quite white and of course very fragrant. I think if I had my way, or if I decided to take it up, I'd go to the true species, which I really like, which is Philadelphus coronaris. This wonderful green mound is lemon balm. And I think it's wonderful how this lemon balm and this grass all sort of you can see how they become companions together as they merge as one single composition. And planting little plants like this golden thyme on the edge of the path sort of softens the way, so the path or the pattern that you make isn't always so straight on. It sort of starts to have a little amorphous effect, which I think makes walking a little more charming and pleasant. This is an effect that we all try to achieve when we look at wonderful garden books and pictures, and you start to see roses intermingling with other plants. This is Rosa cornelia, which repeats all summer, growing with spirea reevesiana, which is a double white spirea. Sometimes you can't really make this kind of thing happen. You have to let it happen. I don't know that it was even my intention, because I didn't really know what cornelia did in terms of how it grew. But when I realized that it wanted to ramble, I simply let it ramble itself through the spirea. I think it makes a real charming effect. And coming up in front is a wonderful clump of Phlox paniculata. The Adenophyra confusa, which is ladies' bells, it's a campanula type of plant, will be in bloom probably in 2 weeks. This little rose is a little summer snowflake. It came from an old garden. It's a rooty cutting. I like the fact that it doesn't get very big at all. It sort of blends with all the rest of the plants. Copper fennel is one of my favorites. It gets that wonderful bronze cast. You can see in the morning light, it's just totally, it has a sheen of wonderful dew on it. I made this setting because it functions for me all seasons, but in the fall, it really brings a wonderful sense of life to this part of the garden, because at that point, the fennel is up 4 or 5 feet tall, intermingling with the bronzy reds on this berberis. Right behind it is a loosestrife or lythrum with really nice magenta plumes on it. And this sedum, the type that's called the autumn joy, comes out with big, wonderful pink flower heads that turn reddish brown, just about the same color that's in this berberis. And it's really a spectacular fall effect. And even though it's fall, you know, the heat has waned, so the colors start to wane. And it makes a real subtle, pleasing color scheme, a garden picture for that time of year. This is one of the many Iris germanica types, growing in with Newport pink sweet William, Artemisia silver queen. I really love Iris germanica types. I don't know why these people who breed them though, because it's the color we like. The foliage, of course, is beautiful all the time in the garden. Make sure you don't overplant them too much and rot them out. What I would like for these plant breeders to do is keep this color, but make the flower smaller so it's not so ostentatious. This is an old species in here, and you can see how, to me, more delicate and more appealing this is, because it's not so demanding of the eye to say, look at me. This iris here is one of my very, very favorite forms of Iris siberica. It's named for a person called Bob Hill, who found it in an old garden, and I intend to add more of it to the garden. I think it's, you can see by comparison to this big Germanica type and this is simply more subtle. And as I'm refining my garden, which I do constantly, I'm looking for things that create greater harmony for me, and things that just totally keep blending and blending and blending together. This is another Iris siberica type with, which is a pure white form. And we have white poppies coming in back in the background, and I let Artemisia sort of grow up through everything in here. It softens the whole thing. This is peony Felix Krauss. They're in all 4 quadrants. You can see how wonderfully he's laid his head over for a little rest, and these buds are just now starting to open up. It's a wonderful peony color. At least it's one that appeals to me. And over in this quadrant of the garden, you can see this wonderful blue Iris siberica and this one with some mauve in it, and how well the color of the peony and these combinations of blues and magentas, and in the back, pink rose, bonica coming into bloom. I think it's just a real, in fact, it's very impressionistic. And it's a combination of all those colors and all these forms, all these leaf types, and all these growth habits. It's again, it's the infusion, I think, that makes it pleasant, so that no one single foliage form or no one single color, no particular, not even the season carries the whole garden individually, but weaving and blending all these ideas together. This is why you plant Shirley poppies, which is this is an example of. You never know what color you're going to get. Of course, you could choose, you could choose to get ones in pink shades or whites or singles or doubles. I always just buy a package and sow them in little pots or sow them right in the ground, and I don't know what I'm going to get, but I always enjoy the pleasure of them. They come in such a variety of shades, and the singles and the doubles and semi-doubles create fun for me. We're coming on to this Spirea Bumaldii gold flame. I mean, look at the little blossoms just now being set. Even the buds themselves have a wonderful color, and it becomes cerise when they open up. Look, nature in itself gives you this to this, and look, when you go down inside there, that chartreuse. I mean, some fashion designer should take all these colors and make hats and scarves and dresses and everything, so that somebody could wear something like that, a color combination. And look what it does with the Newport Pink Sweet Williams and this even deeper tone. And it blends with this silver gray foliage back down into another mound of itself, and then more copper fennel blending with this pink bonica rose. And you can look back and see plume poppies coming up in the background with more silver. And in front of that, the wonderful exotic foliage of cardoon. The cardoons are only about 2 feet tall now, but in 3 months they'll be 4 or 5 feet tall. The bouquet by that time, or the plume poppy, which is the one that catches the light, will probably be about 7 to 8 feet tall. A whole new picture develops. And if you want the magic of this color scheme, once again, by that time, we can come in and cut these spireas down 12, 18, 24 inches. We get a whole new spurt of growth that gives us this intoxicating color scheme again. So it's how to use your plants and understanding them. Hesperus, sort of gets planted throughout the entire garden. It's probably one of those plants that sort of pulls the whole garden picture together, because I think it helps when you're making a garden composed of all these rooms, that somehow, quite subtly, and maybe even the choice of plant should be quite subtle in itself, that something about it always keeps appearing everywhere, so that there's that sense of continuity and gentle flow. It's the same thing with the color scheme. You might have more color here, more things going on, more complexities, but the color scheme is not unlike the color scheme in the visitor's garden. It's just stronger and bolder here, because there's more light that allows you to create that stronger sense of color. This is the sweetheart rose. Look at that. And look at all those flowers. Imagine. And the joy of it is being able to just, instead of picking the whole branch and stems and flowers simultaneously, being able to pick one little tiny bud. So look, you have at least 10 or 12 more just on this offset that's full of buds, and right now, look at the little flower. This is the one that is so easy just to stick, in a buttonhole or in a lapel. This is a wonderful foliage plant that I've just put into the garden, which I think is going to be good. Look at the back of that leaf with heuchera, Pallas purple. Another poppy. See how much they vary depending upon the seed. Sometimes I stick a plant in a pot in the garden. This is a caryopteris, which will come on later. But I think it's fun, especially if you've got some bare spots and something didn't come in or you didn't get everything filled in a particular way, is to sit some pots of things in your garden. Even right now, we have a fairy rose trained as a standard. It's been planted in the bottom with sweet alyssum and lobelia in a nice wooden tub that we made because the tub fits into I think the rustic or naive quality that some of the architecture in this garden has. And, you know, when it goes out of bloom, maybe we'll take it and put it somewhere else in the garden and bring something else in bloom. We're back to Betty Pryor again. I think she's looking rather good. You can see how all this new growth has come up because, as I said about the roses, the floribunda types and the hybrid teas, you cut them really hard. If you were shy about it, it'd be sort of shaggy, but because I was very strong and firm about cutting hard, I've gotten all this wonderful, aggressive, strong, new growth on which all the flower buds are. So that's why you don't be afraid. Just know what kind of plant you're working with and what it's going to do for you, and that'll help you understand why you sometimes have to be, you know, pretty hard on them. If you paint a lot, and the more you paint, maybe some people start to make simpler paintings. I think most artists probably keep making more and more complex paintings, and I think that's what this garden is for me. It's the master painting of my life. It's what I put most of my gardening into and probably will. Never achieving perfection, always improving it, always refining it. Always, though, when I walk through, finding a little bit of magic somewhere. Something like this, look at this. Planting this geranium Clary's druge right down at the base of this fairy rose, and look how it just has come up right through it. I think that makes all of it worthwhile, I think. And being such a very complex garden, I think when I walk through it, when I get through working in it sometime, and then come back and walk through it, especially at the end of the day, I may not have done every single thing I thought, but the light in here at the end of the day, the effort that has gone into it, that has to be gratifying itself sometimes. Sometimes it's just enough. It's not what you're going to do, but it's just what you've done that day that should fill up your life and make you feel good about yourself. Once you have the idea of it in you, once you start planning those ideas and you start getting the pleasure of it, you simply just keep planting and doing and finding more ways to express those ideas and get the pleasure from them, that it becomes endless. And endless by that, it becomes endless in its ability to be fulfilling. When you look through the clairvoyante, the first thing you see is a wonderful pair of old terracotta urns, planted with rings of variegated golden ivy. They're on plinths made of stacked terracotta pots, and at their base is a golden form of barberry, and the ground cover a chartreuse sedum. When they come together, it's hard to imagine that anything could be so bright. As it is, we are entering an oval of soft green grass, which is a very quiet relief, especially when compared to its busy neighbor, the borders, and a nice, pleasant place to take a peaceful stroll. The edging, or the coping that defines the oval, is made out of small terracotta pots that were here when I bought the place. It's a real charming, whimsical idea that makes a lot of visitors really enjoy this garden, to see the use of such pots. On both sides, there's a wonderful planting of poppies that will be blooming later. Right now you can see the combination of the pink and white sweet williams and the silvery foliage of artemisia. On the right you can see the cherry laurel hedge that frames the borders. Well, now we're getting a double use, because it's also the back structure of the oval walk. And just as we step up and are about to walk out of the oval garden are a pair of very finely clipped, fastigiate American boxwood forms. They're very, very unusual plants. And I think because they're placed here and are clipped to be very upright cones, sort of emancipate the sense of walking through, finishing your walk, stepping up and walking out into the vegetable garden. My vegetable garden is the garden that satisfies my culinary needs for the kitchen nearly all year round. It's also a nice way to satisfy the farmer in all of us. What I really love about it equally as much is it was an opportunity for me to make a pattern garden, a garden with a strong sense of formality. The pattern is created by 3 diamonds edged in box. These diamonds create a path that allows me to walk through this garden in a zigzag pattern, through the diamonds, from one end of the garden to the other. And then, on the return back to where I started, see a different aspect of the garden, or a different bed. Even though these are formal patterns, they're filled with vegetables, flowers, and herbs, which are not only a visually important aspect of the garden, they're another source of garden pleasure. Aromatics for the kitchen table, flowers that make a salad more delectable, and the things that we grow that we like to eat, like our lettuces and peas, carrots, onions, and beets. Because I like patterns, I've also chosen to lay out each of the beds in a pattern. I've edged each bed with a coating of stone. With the side beds, I started at the stone and worked back with my choice of what color lettuce I wanted. Then a row of onions, another row of a different type of lettuce, and in the back maybe I'll plant peas, and behind that maybe I'll plant tall growing poppies. One of the things I love is that I chose to plant tree roses, the pink fairy in each diamond. Within that pattern, I plant different lettuces. I also decided, because the viola or Johnny jump-ups had reseated themselves all over the garden, popping up everywhere as it were, being Johnny jump-ups, that we interplant them in the diamond patterns with the lettuce. So we have the lettuce and the tulips, the Johnny jump-ups, and in the center we have the roses. And then in the summer we plant a bush form of forward lima, which gives us something nice to eat in the summertime. We've also done some interesting things with herbs, using them decoratively in the garden, even though they're just as valuable to our kitchen and its pleasures as are the vegetables. All the diamond patterns are edged with golden thyme, which really lifts these box patterns right out of the ground. I think the essence behind the whole garden, as you look at it, walk through it, is simply that I get to create, within this ordered structure, the sense of formality, intricate designs full of colors, forms, and textures, working together to make me a living mosaic or kaleidoscope that is absolutely full and made of life itself. at sunset, when the light is at its loveliest, I take a stroll and I just walk around my garden, and I stop, and what I do in that moment is let the garden simply give me pleasure, because the garden is wanting to give it to me. And so then I think I really have grasped the idea of what it's all about, because I'm letting the garden give itself to me. I gaze upon the garden, my heart grows peacefully still. From its color comes my being, from its spirit comes my will. When I came here, it didn't look like this at all. But I was inspired by the idea of a painting of a little tiny house sitting in a setting with picket fences and arbors and vines and window boxes, things spilling over, sweet peas, nasturtiums, petunias, poppies, zinnias, whatever it is. But whatever the idea was composed of, it was the image that inspired me. And I have worked to carry out those ideas, so that even for me to go out and walk across the street and look at it, I look at it and think, God, I want a place like that. I want a place that looks just like that. And I walk across the street and I realize, I have it. And the reason why I have it is because I am willing to have it. And I think you have to be willing to have it in order to create it. You have to be willing to have it within yourself and express it and let it go.